So one of JJ's former teams, the Pelicans, may have interest in trading up in the draft to acquire Scoot Henderson. Now, New Orleans' best two commodities, Zion Williamson or Brandon Ingram, might have to be a part of the trade package to get a deal like that. What are you hearing?
Yeah, let's just be honest. The Pelicans, it's not a very well-kept secret, have interest in moving up. They've got the 14th pick in this draft, so they have that they can barter with. They have other picks they can barter with, but to really go high in this draft where there's high value in those top three, you're probably going to have to include one of those two players. Now, this is a fascinating conversation. We are in the era of smoke screens and misdirections here leading up to the trade or to the draft, but it is an indication that for the first time they are considering what it would mean to move Zion Williamson. This is a guy who they've really wanted to make their franchise player. They gave him a max contract extension last July 1st. They moved early. They agreed to it quickly. And here we are less than a year later, and this is where we are after another injury-plagued season. There's a couple of realities here. Number one, the couple of the top teams may not want to move the picks. They may really like the idea of drafting Brandon Miller and Scoot Henderson and, the Thompson twins and some of those other guys up there. The other thing is that Zion's value is debatable. He is a bona fide all-star player when he plays. He has a skill set that is really unmatched in the league. He, in my view, is the most effective interior scorer since Shaq. You cannot stop him, even though he often plays below the rim. I mean, really, it's him and Jokic when it comes to efficiency in the paint, even though he's 6 inches shorter than Jokic. He's so powerful in there, but he just hasn't been able to stay healthy. And when they signed him to this contract, Molly, that I just mentioned, the contract is not fully guaranteed. There's protections in that contract, and there was two reasons why they did that. One reason is because they were worried about him getting re-injured, specifically his foot, which had been broken the year before and cost him all of last season. The other thing is that with that contract, Zion potentially becomes more valuable in trade. Because if he's under a fully guaranteed 5-year deal and you're trading him and acquiring somebody with injury concerns, that's one thing. If he's got some protection in it, a new team that would trade for him would inherit that protection. But one thing that is definitely an issue here is, what is Zion's value? Is Zion's value significant enough in the league that he would be worth doing that? If you're asking my personal opinion, I think Zion is one of the most talented players I've ever seen. I'd be extraordinarily careful moving off a player of that talent level, even with everything that's happened. So for the Pelicans to do it, they would have to have an extraordinary belief in the player they'd potentially be drafting if that's indeed the route that they went. Yeah, because in 4 seasons, he's missed 203 games. JJ?
Well, if I'm the Pelicans, first of all, I'm not trading Brandon Ingram. I want to be very clear on that. I'm not trading Brandon Ingram. Brandon is coming off a year where he had a toe injury, missed a chunk of time, but he is more responsible than anyone for the Pelicans just being in the playoff game. I thought his play down the stretch of the regular season was unbelievable. Turns 26 in September. He's just entering his prime. You're talking about a guy that averages 25, 5, and 5. And here's the important part. I realize Brandon Ingram has had some injuries, but I've been around Brandon. I don't question his commitment to the game. There is no question. Those are the type of guys that you want to build around. As it pertains to Zion, I think some context on last season is important. Pelicans started out 18-8 in December, first place in the league. On January 1st, they were 23-13, a game out of first. Denver was in first. They were tied with Memphis for second. And then the very next day, Zion gets hurt. They are not that far away with a healthy Zion. He's that good. Windhorst called him one of the most talented young players. Look, I think he's a generational talent. I really do, when he's on the basketball court. So if I'm the Pelicans, I don't understand the thought process unless, and I'll get to that in a second, I don't understand the thought process of trading a generational talent in the hopes that you can get potentially another generational talent. I think he's good enough. I think Brandon Ingram is good enough. I think the way they've drafted with Herb Jones and Dyson Daniels and getting Trey Murphy in the trade, obviously, coming off right a week after the draft or whatever it was, they have done a good job of building around these two stars. It comes down to health, which brings me to this point. The only way I'm considering trading Zion Williamson is if I know right now in mid-June that he's not in shape. He's had 5 months since the initial injury. He's had 4 months since the re-aggravation in early February. Like, as of right now, coming off a hamstring injury, he should be strong. He should be fit. He should be back on the court. And if you're still not seeing that level of commitment, well, yeah, I think it's at that point, you have to look at moving him. But if he's in shape, I'm not moving him.
Real quick, as far as being in shape, is that all on him or is that on the team as well?
Oh, it's both parties. And look, this is my perspective as an athlete. You take personal accountability. You take personal responsibility for your body. This is what makes you money, is being healthy and being on the court. That's part of your job. It's not just about going on the court and playing basketball. It's all the stuff that goes into it. And by all accounts, Zion hasn't been great with that. But I will say some of the responsibility lies with the team, surrounding him with the right people, holding him accountable to be doing his rehab and to be doing his strength work. So it's both parties to me. And I don't know what you've heard about behind the scenes in New Orleans, but from what I know, both parties have been guilty of some errors.
Can the Warriors contend for a title, JJ, without Draymond on the roster?
Absolutely not. Draymond is so important to everything they do on both sides of the basketball. Defensively, specifically, what we saw last year was a non-elite defense from the Golden State Warriors. They get beat at the point of attack too much. They foul too much. They hovered around 15th all season long in defensive rating. And yet, Draymond Green had another elite defensive season. Like, he is the anchor of that defense. When the Golden State Warriors have contended, it's because they've had a great defense. You lose him with really no way to replace him, you're not winning an NBA championship. I don't have the Golden State Warriors as the #1 contender going into next season like Mad Dog did yesterday with his A-list. But they're still in a tier of teams in the Western Conference who, depending on what they do this summer with the draft and free agency, around the edges, I believe those teams can compete. And the Golden State Warriors are one of those teams. But they're not winning without Draymond, and there's no way to replace Draymond if he does leave.
Wendy, before you jump in, I just remember the odds because we did it the other day. They're actually tied for 5th best odds to win the title with the Lakers. Wendy?
Yeah, I mean, I think the word contend, we can debate what the word contend means, but I think there's a world in which Draymond was not on the Warriors and they could contend. But what JJ said is so important. If not Draymond, who replaces him? And here's the real thing that faces the Warriors. They have not just Draymond Green, who is almost certainly going to opt out of his contract. He's got a player option for $27 million. He's going to want security no matter what, whether it's in Golden State or somewhere else. They also have Klay Thompson to deal with this offseason. Klay Thompson has a year left on his contract after this year, but this is the time in the NBA where you talk about extension. This is what they did with Andrew Wiggins last year. And the Andrew Wiggins situation is very important when we talk about what happens with Draymond and with Klay Thompson and we look at the future of the Warriors. Andrew Wiggins signed an extension that included a $9 million pay cut. He reset his salary structure, took it back, took a longer deal out, and guaranteed him a lot of money. This guy was coming off the best performance of his career in the NBA Finals. He took that pay cut. And the reality is this, with the new rules that are coming into place, which might as well be called anti-Warriors rules, a big chunk of this CBA is aimed squarely at the Warriors and their ability to spend like crazy. They really, to keep this team together, they really need Draymond Green and Klay Thompson to consider, if not taking pay cuts like Andrew Wiggins, not going for the all-out payday that potentially they could get if they went elsewhere. If that's what Draymond wants, it's going to be hard for the Warriors to do that. It's going to be hard for the Warriors to give Klay Thompson more than the $43 million that he is guaranteed for next year. I think they're going to hope to do what they did with Wiggins and get those guys to take a step back. Now, it's a hard sell because you say, well, wait a minute, this organization makes hundreds of millions of dollars. It's a cash cow, but they're headed for a $400 million payroll this year. And it's also a hard sell when Jordan Poole did get paid and did get his big raise. But the reality is that the Warriors are hitting a wall, not only in terms of how much money they can spend, but with the new rules that are going to make keeping this core together. The new rules are aimed at trying to force the Warriors to break up. And Draymond is the first domino that is hovering right there on the edge.
Wendy, correct me if I'm wrong. with the new CBA, the second tax apron, which is extremely punitive in terms of being able to build out your roster. You can't aggregate salary in trades. You can't use any exceptions. You essentially would then rely on only minimum contracts to fill out your roster. That doesn't kick in for 2 more years, correct? Is that right?
The actual implication of the second there's some new rules that come in this year.
Yes.
But the so-called second apron doesn't come in until after this upcoming season.
Correct. So look, I think given that and given how Steph Curry played at an all-NBA level this season, was fantastic in the playoffs. Given that, I still think you have a window to build around Steph. Klay, despite how he shot the ball in the Lakers series, had a fantastic season, particularly the last 75% of the season or so, led the NBA in three-pointers. Draymond had another elite defensive season. I'm never going to advise a player to take less money. And particularly with both Klay and Draymond, Klay coming off 2 injuries, he's getting older. Draymond, this will probably be his last really big payday. You have to go for it. Given what they've accomplished for the Warriors, given how they've shown the ability to spend on players, now there's other things in that organization they're particularly cheap with, but given how they've shown they're willing to spend on players, I think you can run this back for 2 more years. Potentially trade Jordan Poole. I know his value probably isn't as high as it was this time last year, but you could trade him, build around the edges. There's question marks about Dante DiVincenzo and bringing him back because of his contract structure and what he essentially took less money to go on the Warriors and build his value back up, which he did. So there's a lot of question marks, but if you have Steph Curry playing at an all-time level, I'm paying Klay Thompson. I'm playing Draymond. There's no untradeable contract in the NBA. History has shown that.
Thanks for watching ESPN on YouTube. For live streaming, sports, and premium content, subscribe to ESPN+.